Some memories deserve to burn.
Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. If someone had told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting in a quiet lodge near the Chazy River, far from the chaos of my past, I would have laughed. Back then, my life seemed predictable. Stable job, loving family, and lifelong friends. But the steady rhythm of everyday life can mask hidden cracks until one day, everything shatters. I wasn't searching for change. It found me. Betrayal came like a sudden storm, ripping apart the foundation I thought was unshakable. The hardest part wasn't losing what I had. It was realizing that what I believed in was never real. That realization set me on a path I never imagined, leading to new faces, unexpected alliances, and the rediscovery of myself. It was lunchtime on Friday at the Peanut Bar, our regular hangout. This spot is where the Idiots Club assembles each week, an exclusive yet somewhat pathetic crew of 4 middle-aged men who gather to wallow in our shared frustrations. Our bond isn't formed through mutual hobbies or friendship, but through the painful realization that each of us is dealing with the betrayal of our wives. The group consists of Derek Porter, Glenn Parker, Victor Reynolds, and myself, Mark Benson. We've known each other since high school, and over the past 2 decades, we've all married our high school sweethearts. We've remained tight-knit friends through it all. Between us, we have 6 children, 2 of mine, who are all either in high school or college. Life was full, kids to raise, bills to manage, and we buried ourselves in work and family obligations. But as our kids became more self-sufficient, our wives found themselves with more free time. They spent it on shopping, daytime outings, and cultivating their own little social circles. For us, free time was a scarce commodity. Outside of our regular Friday lunches, we occasionally threw weekend barbecues or parties at one of our homes, though these moments were few and far between, overshadowed by the demands of daily life. Gradually, the secrets our wives had been hiding started to surface. Victor was the first to pick up on something odd. Initially, he thought it was just his wife, Diane. He casually mentioned it one day, and from there, it all started to spill out. None of us had concrete proof that our wives were being unfaithful, but we all started noticing small signs that something was off. Derek found a list online of warning signs husbands should watch for if they suspected infidelity. After reviewing it, we all became increasingly anxious. Our weekly lunches shifted to discussions of our wives' activities over the previous week. Soon, we found ourselves inventing suspicions just to validate the dark thoughts we were having. None of us were brave enough to confront our wives directly. We'd been married too long to risk driving a wedge between us if our doubts turned out to be unfounded. We also feared the fallout a false accusation could have on our children. But the real fear was that our suspicions might be justified. Glenn had a friend of a friend who worked for a private investigator. We pooled $4,000 for a week of surveillance. We handed over photos, phone numbers, license plate details, and car descriptions. The investigator was set to start on Monday and report back to us the following Friday. It was going to be a long, nerve-wracking week. The women were all nearing their 40s, though none had quite reached it yet. They all looked great for their age. Diane, Victor's wife, was tall with straight auburn hair that fell to her shoulders. There wasn't a hint of curl in it. Her bangs, which came down to her eyebrows, gave her eyes a deep, mysterious look, compensating for her lack of curves. She was petite, with a modest bust and a narrow frame, even after having 2 daughters. Glenn and his wife Laura had a son in college. Their child had been an unplanned surprise while they were still in high school. Laura was the shortest of the group, just over 5 feet. Though she had a bit of a hippie vibe, she dressed in a way that hid it well. She dyed her hair blonde and styled it in an updo to try and appear taller, but it never quite worked. Of everyone, Laura had the most engaging personality, always able to make people laugh. Derek had married a fiery Italian woman named Monica. Monica had the kind of body men would dream of. Her dark, almost black hair complemented her olive skin. She was a non-stop talker. They had a daughter who looked just like her. My wife, Cheryl, was the closest to being the leader of the group. She wasn't quite as tall as Diane, but she wasn't far behind. She had natural blonde hair, which she wore just past her shoulders. I always thought she was beautiful, but she had some acne scars from her teenage years that she covered with makeup. She was self-conscious about them, and I was careful never to mention it. I wasn't the most handsome guy around, but I felt lucky just to be with her. By Thursday night, I was emotionally drained. Cheryl seemed in high spirits, and we had a great dinner together. Our sons, Josh and Jordan, left the house by 6 o'clock, going wherever they pleased. Their grades were good, and they never got into trouble, so I didn't pry. Cheryl and I spent the evening alone watching TV, our usual routine. I began to wonder if maybe that was the issue. Maybe I wasn't offering enough excitement or variety in her life. Of course, I still had no idea what the real problem was, though I had a feeling I'd learn more the next day, for better or worse. I wanted to bring it up with her, but had no idea how to start the conversation. I spent most of the evening lost in thought. After Cheryl went to bed, the boys came home. We made small talk for a few minutes, and then they headed to bed. I grabbed a beer and stayed up watching reruns of old sitcoms until I fell asleep on the couch. The TV was still on when I woke up the next morning, and the boys were just leaving for school. "Mark, what's going on? You've seemed off the past week or so. Is everything okay at work?" Cheryl asked, looking concerned. "No, everything's fine at work, hon. I just have a lot on my mind," I answered. "Can I help? Is there anything I can do?" she pressed. I slowly stood up from the couch and headed upstairs. "I'm afraid it's too late now. What's been done can't be undone." I left her with that cryptic remark as I went to take a shower. 30 minutes later, I was heading out the door. Cheryl had made coffee and a light breakfast, but I walked right past her without saying a word. She looked worried, and I guess she had every reason to be. The morning dragged on, and it felt like lunch would never come. By the time I arrived, Victor, Derek, and Glenn were already at the table. I thought I'd be early, but they had all beaten me there. We decided not to order food, just drinks. "All right, gentlemen," Frank Perella, the investigator assigned to our case, began. He tried to make the mood lighter by joking. "I have reports from 4 different days, each involving a different wife. Who wants to go first, or should I break it down by day?" We opted for the day-by-day approach, and Frank began with Monday. "To kick things off, each of your wives was involved with someone different on each of the first 4 days. We've only gathered information on times and places, but no solid photographic or audio evidence. That would cost a lot more and take much longer." He paused dramatically. Interestingly, each wife had her own affair on separate days. The other 3 acted as cover, all leaving and returning together. If they went shopping, the 3 who weren't meeting anyone would buy something for the one who was. If there was an issue, it seems like they all covered for each other. He looked around for any questions. There were none, so he continued. On Monday, they all left together in Cheryl's car, which was the easiest part of the week to follow. At 10 a.m., they dropped Monica off at 321 David Drive and then went to the Berkshire Mall. I went back to the David Drive house to watch what happened next. A guy named Steve Springer rents the place. He works as a body technician at Henderson Ford in Tarrytown. We later found out that a call was made to the house 10 minutes before Monica was dropped off. The phone was unregistered, but we have the number. We're not sure which of the women owns it, though. Frank paused again, looking for reactions. There was a lot to process, but no one seemed surprised. Derek didn't seem like himself. His usual calm was gone, replaced by visible tension. He had always struggled with his temper, but now it was clear that he was having a harder time keeping it under control. Glenn leaned in and quietly spoke to him, and Derek seemed to ease up a little. About 3 hours later, a call was made from the house phone to the cell phone, Frank continued, breaking the silence. 10 minutes after that, Cheryl and the others drove by and picked up Monica. She then dropped each of them off at their homes. That was Monday. Any questions? By now, Derek was practically vibrating with anxiety. "Can I get a beer?" he asked, his voice strained. We all ordered drafts, and Frank took a sip of his before moving on. On Tuesday, it was Monica's turn to drive. They headed to Renninger's Antique Market, which is about 10 miles out of town. They parked and stuck together as they made their way through the market. It was a bit tricky to keep an eye on them in the crowded aisles, but it didn't take long before something significant happened. A call was made from the cell phone about 10 minutes before they arrived. It was to the Dorchester Motel, located across from the market. Diane Reynolds slipped away from the group and exited through the front door. I followed her as she crossed the road and went into room 819 at the Crown Hotel. Frank glanced at the group, watching the reactions before adding, "Daniel Prescott had booked the room the day before?" Victor, looking deflated, sunk into his chair after finishing his beer. "I thought she'd been going to the optometrist a lot recently," he muttered. The mood at the table grew heavy. No one seemed to know how to respond. We decided to order another round, with Diane now taking the wheel. The following day, Wednesday, was no less troubling. They all went to the farmer's market, but this time things were different. The call that day went to another phone, one that could be traced. Instead of parking close to the market, they drove to the back lot where the RVs were parked. The 4 of them walked through the motorhome area, but only 3 of them entered the market. I had to figure out what happened to Laura Parker. She wasn't anywhere in sight. I took note of 23 motorhome license plates that looked like they could be connected. After some quick cross-checking, I found myself standing in front of a large Winnebago owned by Owen Zimmer, the owner of the Volvo dealership in Lancaster. Not long after, Laura emerged from the RV and joined the other women for lunch. They were laughing and chatting, seemingly at ease. As they walked back to their car later, I turned to Glenn. "You drive a Volvo, right?" "Yeah, we got it last year in Lancaster," Glenn replied. "Wanted to do something nice for Laura." "That's a joke," I muttered under my breath. But I wouldn't laugh. I wasn't sure what I expected next, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. I was the last one to hear the full story. "All right, Frank," I said, exasperated. "What the hell happened on Thursday?" Frank didn't hesitate. Thursday, Laura drove the Volvo to the King of Prussia Mall. They strolled around casually. At one point, Cheryl made a cell phone call and handed it off to Jenny. They started heading toward the executive suites at the north end of the mall. Then Cheryl slipped away and took the elevator. She went up to the 5th floor. My team managed to dig through the details and confirmed the room reservation. State Assemblyman Alan Wallace had rented room 511 for a business conference that afternoon. Frank continued. At 2 p.m., a call was placed from that room to the same mysterious cell phone. 10 minutes later, the group was back together and heading home. Frank concluded the session with a final note. "That's the gist of it. We'll be preparing detailed reports for each of you. If you want to dig deeper, just let us know." I caught myself smiling for a moment, and Victor couldn't help but ask, "What's so funny?" "Peter Wallace is a liberal," I said with a half smile. "Cheryl and I are both conservatives. I thought it was funny." The others just stared blankly. Frank gathered his notes, which were rough drafts of the full reports, but they contained all the vital information. We thanked him, and he left us to our own thoughts. The atmosphere was thick with discomfort, and no one wanted another drink. Glenn and Victor were the first to leave for the day, and soon, Derek and I followed suit. When I got home, Cheryl's car was gone. It was her day for grocery shopping, and at least she was doing that on her own. The boys were still in school. I used the quiet house as a chance to move my clothes and personal items into the guest room. I was finishing up when Cheryl returned. I helped her unload the groceries, but she didn't ask why I was home so early. Her face still carried the same look of concern it had when I left that morning. I tried to stay out of her way as she put everything away. She knew where everything went, and I didn't. Within no time, she had dinner underway. She was an excellent cook and homemaker. Just as the boys arrived home, the phone rang. I exchanged pleasantries with them while Cheryl took the call. When she hung up, her face was filled with worry. "What happened today?" Cheryl asked, her voice tight. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "That was Laura on the phone," she said, her voice trembling. "Derek came home early and accused Monica of cheating. They got into a fight, and now Monica's in the hospital. The police are talking to Derek. Laura called Monica's parents. She said it all started because of the meeting you guys had earlier today. Mark, what's going on? Why won't you tell me? This isn't the time for games." I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed the speed dial number I'd added earlier. The look on Cheryl's face was immediate as her prepaid phone, the one I knew she had hidden in her purse, began to ring. I wasn't 100% sure she was carrying it, but I took the chance anyway. "Aren't you going to answer that?" I asked. "It might be important." There was a brief pause before she whispered, "Oh, God. You know, don't you?" "I know everything," I said flatly. We both knew this moment was inevitable, and there was no escaping it, especially with Josh and Jordan about to join us for dinner. "You're not going to say anything in front of the boys, are you?" Cheryl asked, her voice shaking. "I won't if you're honest with them," I replied. "But if you lie or try to downplay it, I'll tell them everything myself. You won't like that." We sat down to eat, as we normally would, though I wasn't sure Cheryl would actually tell the boys right then. I had hoped the meal might pass quietly and she could address it later. That didn't happen. As we were halfway through dinner, Josh spoke up. "Dad, why did you move your stuff into the guest room?" he asked, not looking up from his plate. "Is something going on with you two?" Both of the boys were watching us closely, yet still keeping their focus on their food. Cheryl had no idea I'd moved my things into the guest room, and I could see her starting to panic. "I'll let your mother explain that," I said, keeping my tone even. Cheryl hesitated. She wasn't prepared for this, and I wasn't sure if she could handle it. And sure enough, I was right. "Your father and I thought it might be a good idea to spend some time apart," she said, stumbling over her words. "It's only temporary, and it's nothing for you boys to worry about." I put my fork down and looked directly at Cheryl. I'm sorry, but that's not going to cut it. Either you tell them the truth or I will. Her face flushed with panic. She still wasn't sure how much I knew, but she clearly didn't want to say anything in front of the boys. I'm sorry, Mark, she whispered, her voice shaky. But that's the best I can do. By now, Josh and Jordan had both put their forks down and were staring at us. The tension in the room was unbearable. The longer I waited, the more frustrated I became. Yesterday afternoon, your mother spent 4 hours at the Executive Suite Hotel in King of Prussia with her lover, having unprotected closeness, I said, my voice steady but cutting through the silence. The table was dead quiet. Cheryl's face turned pale and she avoided looking at anyone. She was frozen, not even seeming to breathe. Without a word, Josh and Jordan got up and walked out, heading straight for the front door. That was cruel, Mark, Cheryl finally muttered, her voice breaking. You didn't have to do that. I gave you a choice, I said, my voice flat. You didn't take it. What you did to me? That was cruel. I'll move out of the guest room as soon as I find an apartment. Cheryl ran upstairs, tears streaming down her face. I cleaned up the dinner, but nobody had eaten, so it all went straight into the trash. I was loading the dishes when she came downstairs, holding a small bag. She paused at the door and said without turning around, It wasn't unprotected. We always used protection. Her words were barely audible, but I could tell they were meant to ease her guilt. I hadn't been sure, but that admission confirmed the situation. Where will you go? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I'm going to stay with Janice, she said, looking at me for the first time all night. I watched her drive off, heading toward her sister's house. It was after midnight when the boys came home. I was still sitting on the couch, nursing my 5th beer. They didn't say a word, just went straight upstairs. The next morning, I was still on the couch when the doorbell rang incessantly. I stumbled toward the door and found Glenn and Victor standing there, holding coffee and Danish. Victor set everything on the kitchen table, and we sat down in silence for a while. Finally, Victor broke the quiet. Derek's still in jail, he said. He's waiting for his parents to bail him out. Monica's out of the hospital and staying with her parents. We don't know if she's pressing charges yet. It's a damn shame a grown man has to call his parents for bail money. He paused, then asked, What about you guys? How are things on your end? Victor spoke first. I got a message on the answering machine when I got home yesterday. Laura left a message for Diane saying she knew everything. I checked and half of her stuff was gone. No idea where she is. He sighed, clearly frustrated. Luckily, the girls are at school. That's all I've got. Glenn was more reluctant to talk, but eventually gave in. Laura left me a note saying she was going to visit her parents in Frackville for the weekend. She said she'd call when she got there. Never got a call. I nodded. Same here. Cheryl and I had it out last night. Part of it was in front of the boys. She packed a bag and left for her sister's place. No idea when I'll hear from her. Victor's face tightened. Mark, how did they figure out we knew? I'm guessing Derek confronted Monica right away when he got home, and she called Laura before things got out of hand, I said. I know Laura called Cheryl around dinner time. I'm sure that's when she left the message for Diane. Glenn's anger was simmering. And what about the guys involved in all this? Does anyone know what's going on with the a-holes who started it? He was visibly frustrated, and I could see why. This mess was spiraling out of control, and none of us knew how it was going to end. The next few hours were spent talking about our problems. Josh and Jordan listened quietly, but didn't say a word. I decided not to hide anything from them. After Victor and Glenn left, I had a serious talk with the boys. They both wanted to stay in the house until they finished school, preferring to stay with me over their mother. I didn't try to influence them or speak ill of Cheryl. It didn't seem to matter. Sunday was filled with yard work, mowing, edging, and pruning. We kept busy, but there was no mention of the family situation. Cheryl didn't call. Derek, however, did, letting me know he was out on bond. Monica had filed a restraining order against him. It struck me as strange that we, the ones who hadn't done anything wrong, were stuck dealing with the mess created by our wives. Monday didn't bring any relief. I was grateful that Josh and Jordan were old enough to take care of themselves. Josh would be leaving for college in a few months, and Jordan would follow next year. Derek showed up before I left for work. We went to IHOP to catch up. Monica agreed to drop the charges against Derek if he agreed to a no-fault divorce. Derek planned to start the paperwork right after breakfast. I knew I needed to act as well, since my marriage was effectively over. Derek and I agreed that a meeting with our wives might help. I offered to buy the pizza if they brought the beer. Work was a struggle. Elaine, my secretary, asked why I hadn't returned to work Friday afternoon, but quickly dropped it when she saw I wasn't in the mood to talk. The real shock came just before noon. A man from the state attorney's office, Nelson Naus, showed up. He handed me a cease and desist order, demanding I stop investigating Assemblyman Alan Wallace. He threatened criminal prosecution if I continued. I politely informed him that, as a public figure, Wallace was open to scrutiny, but he didn't care. He gave me a sarcastic smile and left, making it clear that he thought he'd won. I took the rest of the day off. Philadelphia had 4 major TV stations, and 3 of them were eager to hear about the cease and desist order. I gave them the story, leaving nothing out, even mentioning my wife. The 4th station, extremely liberal, wasn't interested. I hit the smaller stations on the way home, but they had already picked up the story from the wire services. As I pulled into my driveway, I heard talk radio discussing Wallace's affair. I didn't need to dig any further into his private life. I already knew what I needed to. If legal action was taken against me, it would only make things worse. Cheryl had returned home while I was out and removed all her belongings. She left a note saying she'd be staying with her sister indefinitely. I had no choice but to stay in the house with the boys, which was fine by me. The next day, I planned to visit the bank and see a lawyer. When the boys came home from school, they immediately left to hang out with friends. They were fine, but preferred their friends' company over mine. At 5 o'clock, I got a call from Cheryl. She didn't explain what she wanted, just ranted about how awful I was for airing our problems. I tried to explain how her boyfriend had set everything in motion, but she wasn't interested. No matter what the circumstances, I was to blame. It was starting to feel like a game. Soon after, Victor, Derek, and Glenn arrived. I ordered pizza and we settled in for a long evening. Victor explained that Daniel Prescott had disappeared with over $60,000 from the Superlens Optical. Victor was sure Diane was with him. He'd canceled his credit cards, but Diane had used one at a motel in Indiana. He'd alerted the authorities. Derek had driven by 321 David Drive, but the house was empty. He also stopped by the body shop where Steve Springer had worked, hoping to find a forwarding address. Derek was planning a trip to Nitro, West Virginia to track him down. We all wished him luck. Glenn had a mischievous grin as he filled us in on the strange disappearance of Laura's Volvo. It had been parked right in front of her parents' house in Frackville, but when she went to get it, it was gone. Though the car was insured, its value exceeded the amount the insurance would pay out. Laura hadn't called him yet, and no one had reported the car missing. Glenn assured us that Owen Zimmer would be hearing from him soon. As for what happened to the car, no one knew. After I went over the details about Alan Wallace's television situation, we spent a bit of time brainstorming ways we might be able to assist each other. Eventually, we decided to call it a night. By the time the beer ran out, and I hadn't even started cleaning up, the boys were home. They'd been getting a lot of grief about their mother, and it was clear they were upset. I had no idea how I could help them. Work didn't even cross my mind at that point. The next morning, just before I got to the office, Elaine called my cell. Apparently, a few state officials and police officers were waiting for me there. She had told them I would be in Baltimore for the day, and had also informed the personnel office that I was taking a sick day. I ended up spending the rest of the morning with my lawyer. The afternoon was spent at the bank. If anyone from the state was trying to find me, they weren't doing a very good job. Around 3 p.m., I received an unexpected call. "Jack Benson, this is Linda Wallace." "Actually, it's Mark, but I'll answer to anything. What's going on?" "Meet me at Luciano's in the bar at 5 o'clock. "I'll recognize you." "Any particular reason?" "I think we can help each other." "All right, see you at 5. I hadn't been expecting a call from Linda Wallace. I'd seen her in the media, often portrayed as the woman behind her weak-willed husband. She was wealthy and knew exactly how to use her influence. I had a feeling that Alan had crossed some line this time, one that was going to cost him. Linda was known for her perfect appearance, blonde hair, flawless makeup, and high-end fashion. She was the epitome of high maintenance, though I wondered if Cheryl was trying to take her place. But Cheryl didn't have the same resources. Linda did. I stopped by my house to grab a fresh shirt and tie, but I couldn't get in. The place was surrounded by official-looking cars. Looks like I'd have to meet Linda Wallace, all sweaty and unkempt. At Luciano's, I had no trouble finding Linda. A large man in a dark suit greeted me at the door and led me to a secluded corner booth. "Do you mind if I call you Jack?" "Not at all. My father calls me Jack, though he's the only one." The lighting in the booth was dim, but even in the low light it was clear that Linda's hair, though graying, was naturally blonde. She was well over 40, but her appearance didn't show it. Her attire was simple yet stylish. A white blouse paired with a beige skirt, accented by a delicate crystal heart necklace that gave her outfit a polished look. Linda began by expressing gratitude, thanking me for the way I had embarrassed her husband. She acknowledged that she might have done it herself, but her situation had made it difficult. She also apologized for the price I'd paid in the process, implying it must have been hard to learn the truth about my wife. I explained that I hadn't intended to humiliate either of them. Ideally, I would have kept everything quiet, but her husband had crossed a line, pushing me to respond in a way I didn't like. I was not someone who reacted well to threats. Linda seemed to understand, but then she admitted that, rather than feeling humiliated, she felt relieved. She had been planning to leave Alan for some time, but the timing was tricky. She didn't want to appear vengeful or spiteful. Now, with the situation out in the open, it was easier for her to move on. It didn't take long before Linda suggested we could help each other. Her proposal was clear. She wanted me to act as the villain in her marriage so that she could proceed with a divorce without it reflecting poorly on her. I agreed, outlining my offer in return. She had 3 explicit videos of her husband and my wife, all high-quality recordings. She was willing to give her copies of the tapes, but in exchange, I asked her to promise that she would make the footage public. This was a high-stakes request, one that could have far-reaching consequences. Linda didn't seem taken aback. She understood the gravity of what I was asking, but she also made it clear that she had something to show me. The final video, she said, included a conversation between Alan and my wife, one that was cruel and hurtful. She implied that I might change my mind about making the tapes public once I saw just how damaging their words were. Though reluctant, I admitted that my wife and I hadn't exactly treated each other well either. Linda pressed me to consider her perspective, emphasizing that once the tapes were in my hands, I'd have the final say about their release. However, she trusted that I would be fair in my decision. I felt the weight of the decision bearing down on me, and the conflict stirred inside me. Needing a moment to think, I suggested we order drinks. Linda waved for the waiter, and a few moments later, our drinks arrived. We sat in silence for a while, both of us lost in thought. I absent-mindedly squeezed a lime wedge into my gin and tonic, letting its sharp flavor cut through my uncertainty. After a few minutes, I made my choice. I agreed to the deal. It felt like a relief for both of us, and Linda's eyes brightened in response. Alan Wallace, in her mind, was a fool, someone who had thrown away everything he had for nothing. Linda then assured me that I wouldn't have to worry about maltreatment from state or local authorities. While her husband may have held a position of power, she was confident that he didn't wield nearly as much influence as he believed. She slid 3 CDs across the table, explaining that they contained the videos, along with some phone recordings on the 3rd disc. She hoped I would find the editing process enjoyable and reminded me not to do anything that might embarrass my sons. I reassured her that I wouldn't cross any lines with the footage, and she clarified that she wasn't in any of the videos. While she might be hurt by the content, she wouldn't feel embarrassed by it. As our conversation wound down, I felt like our meeting was coming to a close. I asked her if we would meet again, and she responded with a smile, asking if it was necessary or if I simply wanted to see her again. I quickly apologized, realizing the comment had been out of place. Linda brushed it off, telling me it hadn't come across as anything more than a casual remark. We exchanged a brief smile before I pocketed the CDs and prepared to leave. Before I stood up, Linda gave me a time and place for our next meeting, Friday at 7 o'clock, at the same table. This time, she promised, we would eat. I nodded and agreed, leaving the restaurant with a strange mix of emotions. There was guilt, but also a sense of excitement. I wasn't sure where this path would lead, but there was something about the direction it was taking that intrigued me. When I got home, the black cars were gone. Josh and Jordan had put together a makeshift dinner, mostly things they liked, though not very balanced. Still, I appreciated the effort. We watched a pay-per-view movie together, and then I stayed up all night working on the videos and phone calls Linda Wallace had given me. Most of the videos were dull, with only brief moments of interest. What really hurt, though, was seeing Cheryl's face while Alan engaged in intimate relations with her. That was always a line I never crossed, yet he did it every time they met. Cheryl denied it, but she clearly enjoyed it. During a break, she even told him how lucky he was to experience something she didn't share with her husband. There was also a BJ each time, and Cheryl seemed to genuinely enjoy giving them. She was good at it too. The comments Linda thought would hurt me did, but some of them felt forced, as though Cheryl was just telling Alan what he wanted to hear. Still, the damage was done. At the end of the last video, Alan had a quick phone conversation with a friend after Cheryl left. It was only one side of the talk, but I kept a copy of it, just in case I ever needed it for Cheryl. The next day, I was exhausted from staying up all night, but had to get back to work. I thanked Elaine for covering for me with a bouquet of her favorite daisies. By now, she and everyone at work knew what was going on. I couldn't tell if they saw me as a hero or a fool. A reporter from a Philadelphia TV station came to pick up the edited CD of the love tapes. He seemed excited, but he made it clear that most of it couldn't air on public television. I asked him, half jokingly, if the rest might end up somewhere else, and he smiled, signaling he understood. I handed him a second CD with more graphic content, and he promised everything would be taken care of. Both Josh and Jordan had high SAT scores, making college a given. What I didn't know was that Jordan had applied for early admission to Penn State. He planned to skip his senior year of high school and get a GED instead. I wasn't thrilled about it, but he was confident. Now both of them would be starting college at the same time. I took out a second mortgage on the house to prepay their tuition for 4 years. It drained our savings and the equity Cheryl and I had in the house, but it was done. Now it was time to start making divorce plans. Cheryl wouldn't be happy. Work was falling behind. Elaine was doing great, but she couldn't keep covering for me. Cheryl called, complaining that her credit cards weren't working. I told her she'd need to start using her prepaid cell phone because I was canceling her regular one that afternoon. That night, I warned Josh and Jordan about some disturbing videos of their mother that might end up online. They weren't thrilled, but said they supported whatever I needed to do. The next morning, after Josh and Jordan had left for school, Cheryl knocked on the door. She sat at the kitchen table, visibly distressed, and I gave her a cup of coffee. She asked if we could stop everything, expressing her fear of seeing more pictures of herself online and the impact it was having on our family. She blamed me for making everything public and embarrassing our sons, while claiming that it could have all been kept quiet. I explained that I had tried to keep things private, but when her lover started threatening me, I had no choice but to expose the truth. She responded by defending him, insisting that he wasn't despicable, but understanding and appreciative, something I had failed to be. She said being with him had made her feel good about herself, unlike with me. Her justification for the affair was unsettling. I knew she was wrong about his feelings toward her, and it was time to shatter her fantasy. I pulled out a small digital player and placed it on the table. I told her it was a phone call Alan had made to a friend after their last meeting, and I felt she needed to hear it. As I pressed play, her face changed, and I could see the realization dawning on her. "Hey, Greg, sorry I'm running behind, but it's great as usual. It's a nice way to lift your spirits on a gloomy day." "I don't think so, man. She's good in bed, but I'd never take her out in public. Not a chance. In private? With the lights off? Fine. She's attractive, but that's as far as it goes. Honestly, the only reason I'm still seeing her is because of her body." I know. But her face? Looks like she got attacked with a cheese grater. Seriously, I think she uses a paintbrush for her makeup. That's why I always insist on keeping the lights dim. I'm not sure if she's open to a threesome, but I might bring it up the next time we're together. Nah, I'm good. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. Click. Cheryl was sitting there, frozen, staring ahead without actually focusing on anything. Her eyes were watering. I could tell the recording had hit her hard. All these years of marriage, and I'd never once brought up her teenage acne or the scars it left behind. I couldn't bring myself to hurt her like that. She locked her gaze on me. "I didn't need to hear that. What the hell were you hoping to accomplish with that tape? I thought I could at least hold on to some good memories of us. But now, even that's ruined." It was surreal. Alan Wallace, my wife's lover, just laid bare his feelings for her, and somehow, she was mad at me. I hadn't said a word about her complexion in over 2 decades, yet here she was, defending this guy like he wasn't a total scumbag. I shoved the recorder into my pocket and stood up. She remained motionless at the table, still staring blankly ahead as I turned to leave. "Why the hell did you lie about the protection?" I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get one. At work, I called my lawyer to have the divorce papers served as soon as possible. We'd agreed to cite infidelity as the cause. Nothing softer. The local news reported that Alan Wallace was on an unscheduled vacation in the Bahamas, with no press statement to clarify his whereabouts. Lunch with Victor was interesting. Diane and Prescott had been picked up in Kentucky near Fort Campbell. A local cop was running random license checks on out-of-state plates, and Prescott's came up. Victor didn't know what was going on, but he was clearly enjoying it. They called him to confirm her identity, but there didn't seem to be any further action required on his part. Derek borrowed a car and headed to Nitro, West Virginia. We didn't know his plan and honestly didn't care. Good luck to him. Neither Victor nor I had heard from Glenn in days. The rest of the day was uneventful. A realtor friend was coming by later to list the house. With the boys getting ready to leave and me staying behind, I wasn't looking forward to it. I just hoped the sale would cover real estate fees and closing costs, leaving me with enough to avoid shelling out extra money. The evening news was more interesting than I expected. A $300,000 motorhome had burned down in the Green Dragon Market parking lot. It belonged to Owen Zimmer, a Lancaster businessman, and arson was suspected. I couldn't help but laugh to myself as I grabbed a beer from the fridge. At least Glenn wasn't taking things lying down. There was a Steven Seagal marathon on that night, just like every night. I checked to make sure I had enough beer, though I had no idea where my sons were. Friday at work was slow, which I appreciated. Cheryl called after lunch asking about the for sale sign in the yard. I told her she could take any furniture she wanted and that we'd split the sale proceeds 50/50ths. She didn't argue. I think she finally realized this was really happening. She didn't even know Jordan had been accepted to college early. That bit of info told me the boys were probably not in touch with their mom. She called again later when she got the divorce papers. I told her we'd talk the next day, though she didn't seem happy about the reasons listed on the forms. That evening, I looked forward to dinner. Linda Wallace was sitting in the same spot as before, but tonight she looked even more stunning. Her hair and makeup were flawless, and her dress was both elegant and flattering. As I walked up to the table, I couldn't help but notice how attractive she was. She mentioned that her assistant had the night off for his daughter's piano recital, and she casually pointed out that I might need to drive her home later, advising me to watch my drinking. It sounded a bit like an invitation, though it felt a bit awkward since we didn't know each other well. We decided to have some wine. I wasn't a connoisseur, but I suggested a Portuguese rose if they had it. She teased me about my practical choice, joking that it might turn into a cheap date for her. We shared a cold bottle of Lancers, and I smiled as I took a sip. As the conversation continued, I offered to cover the check, feeling the usual obligation. She jokingly warned me not to order the lobster. The evening remained light and pleasant for the most part. At one point, Linda mentioned that a statement from Cheryl about the affair might help with her divorce. I agreed to discuss it with her. We didn't order more wine, switching instead to coffee. Linda skipped the lobster, and I ended up picking up the check. I drove her home and walked her to the door. She didn't invite me in, but gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, which I didn't mind. It ended just as smoothly as it had started, and I genuinely enjoyed her company. On my way back, I found myself thinking about how I could see Linda again. The next morning, while I was finishing breakfast with the boys, Cheryl showed up. Josh and Jordan tried to be civil, but their efforts were awkward, and soon they disappeared outside. A few minutes later, the sound of the lawnmower shattered the morning quiet. I didn't waste time with small talk. "What's up, Cheryl?" She got straight to the point, asking if I'd be willing to adjust the terms of the divorce, particularly the mention of infidelity. "You don't like the term infidelity?" I asked. "It's just, could we tone it down?" she replied, seeming uncomfortable. I shook my head. "It's already out there, Cheryl. The media exposed it to everyone. Here's the deal. If you'll give a statement to Linda Wallace's lawyer confirming the affair, I'll change the divorce terms to whatever you want." Cheryl was taken aback. "Why do you care about Linda Wallace's divorce?" I hesitated before explaining. "Linda contacted me for help gathering information for her case. She gave me those videos of you and Alan." The mention of the videos clearly upset her. She started tearing up but wasn't fully crying. I handed her a napkin, trying to keep things calm. "I saw some of them," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "It was horrible. They didn't even blur my face. I'm lucky they didn't release my name or where we lived." "And how do you think I felt?" I asked. A bit more harshly than I intended. Cheryl hesitated. "I didn't think about how it would affect you or the kids until after I found out about the videos." "So, you're only upset about getting caught," I said bluntly. She nodded. "I guess you're right. I can't undo what happened. I can't fix it." I refilled her coffee. She wiped her face again and apologized, but her words took a different turn. "Mark, I'm sorry about what happened in those videos. I don't understand why you did things with him that you never did with me. It's like you loved him more than me." Her tears were starting to flow now, but I didn't feel guilty. I wasn't the one who steered the conversation this way. "He was rich and powerful," she said. "I wanted to please him, even though I didn't love him. I'm not beautiful, so I thought maybe if I gave him great closeness, it would make up for it. I did things with him that I never would have done with you." Awful things. I'm sorry, but I can't undo any of it. I set my coffee cup in the sink, no longer interested in more. I grabbed a business card for Linda's lawyer from the fridge and handed it to Cheryl. She didn't need further hints. She headed toward the door. "Cheryl," I said, stopping her, "what really hurt me were the things you said on those tapes. You tore me apart. You criticized everything about me. My looks, my job, my ability to take care of you, our intimacy life. Nothing was off limits. You'll be so relieved when the divorce is final and you're free of your loser husband." Cheryl paused, still crying. "Mark, please." "I'm sorry, Cheryl. Goodbye." I closed the door as she stood crying on the porch. When her car pulled away, the lawnmower's noise stopped. Josh and Jordan came back inside, grabbing Cokes from the fridge. "So, are we going to get an update, or are we still being kept in the dark?" Josh asked, trying to sound casual, but clearly wanting answers. "Your mom wasn't happy about the divorce terms. She wanted me to change it so she didn't look like, well, I said. "I hope you didn't agree to that," Josh replied. "She's your mom, Josh. Have some compassion," I said, though I could tell neither of them was thrilled by that answer. They headed back outside, and the lawnmower roared back to life. Jordan had completed his GED and no longer needed to attend school, while Josh still had to go, but only to meet the attendance requirements, as he had already fulfilled the graduation criteria. Jordan took advantage of the free time to work for a local landscaper. The brothers often joked about their different situations. Josh enjoyed seeing the popular girls at school, while Jordan made money. Things had started to calm down a bit. Owen Zimmer's wife learned the truth behind the fire that destroyed their motorhome. Owen, a salesman at a Volvo dealership, had married the owner's daughter, but the wealth was all hers. When she received an anonymous package, the truth about Owen's financial and personal troubles began to unravel. He was soon facing job loss and divorce. Meanwhile, Laura was still living with her parents, and Glenn had made no attempt to reach out since filing for divorce. Derek returned from West Virginia with a self-satisfied smile, having delivered a newspaper article to Monica detailing Steve Springer's injuries from an alleged unprovoked attack. The real story, however, was that Steve had been attacked by a furious husband with a baseball bat. Monica eventually canceled her divorce petition, though Derek made no promises regarding their future. Victor served divorce papers to Diane while she was in jail, packed up everything, and moved to Pensacola. I never found out what happened to Diane after that, nor did I care. I started spending more time with Linda, meeting her for lunch several times a week and occasionally for dinner on weekends. There was no romantic involvement, just good company. Eventually, we stopped discussing the affair or the divorces, though we often talked about Alan, who still hadn't returned from the Bahamas. It turned out he was involved in a shady business deal about franchising the state motor vehicle inspection program, and large sums of money were changing hands. Linda eventually wanted to meet Josh and Jordan, but I was hesitant. I worried that introducing them could complicate things. Meanwhile, my fellow club members had seemingly sorted out their marital issues, but I felt like mine were still unresolved. That was about to change in an unexpected way. Jordan managed to get summer classes approved for both himself and Josh. With my permission, Josh graduated early, missing the ceremonies but starting college ahead of schedule. Jordan was becoming quite the negotiator. I took some time off work to help them move to campus. When I returned home alone, I was surprised to find a man sitting in my living room, drinking a beer and holding my first edition of The Big Kill. He looked completely at ease. He introduced himself as Vince Carmichael, Linda's father. He said Linda needed help and that I was the one who could provide it. Vince, dressed in a country club-style blazer and gray turtleneck, explained that Linda was being pursued by several groups of people, some of whom were dangerous. He had relocated her to a safe place and needed someone to watch over her, not physically, but more for companionship and comfort. He'd been told I was the right person for the job. He offered me a paid 2-week vacation starting immediately, during which I would accompany Linda to a remote lodge in upstate New York, far from any danger. He needed to handle some business, and he wanted me to be there for Linda during this time. I asked why he had chosen me, and he didn't give a direct answer, only mentioning that he trusted me with her safety. Despite the oddness of the situation, Vince's calm demeanor left me uncertain whether I should be uneasy or relaxed. But he was serious about the need for someone to be with Linda. So I agreed to take the job, not fully understanding what I was getting into. Carmichael hesitated before responding to my question. After a brief pause, he finally spoke, expressing regret for a decision he had made years ago. He had pressured Linda into marrying Alan Wallace, believing him to be a promising political figure. Linda, however, didn't love Alan and had initially rejected the idea. But Vince persisted, and she eventually gave in. Now, he felt responsible for messing up her life and didn't want to make the same mistake again. Curious, I asked, "Why do you think I'm any better?" He simply replied, "She picked you. I can't argue with that." When I returned with a new beer, I asked, "How do I get to this place?" Vince handed me a small GPS device. "It's already programmed. You won't need it until you're north of Plattsburgh. I also have a map for you." As Vince got up to leave, he suggested I take the book with me if I wanted. I politely declined, telling him I'd read it multiple times already. He asked how soon I could leave, and I assured him I'd be on the road before sunrise. After he left, I finished my beer and prepared for bed. It wasn't long before I was on the road, heading north. Just as I neared Binghamton, my phone rang. It was Janice, sounding frantic. "Mark, where are you? I've been trying to get through." "I am on a road trip," I said. "What's going on?" "Cheryl's missing," she said, her voice trembling. "I haven't heard from her since yesterday morning. Do you know where she might be?" "I was at State College with the boys yesterday. I haven't heard from Cheryl. I don't know where she is." Janice asked if I could come over, but I told her I was in New York, headed toward Lake Champlain. I wouldn't be back for at least a week. "Did you notify the police?" I asked. "They're coming by soon, but I was hoping you could talk to them. I'll call you after they leave. I'll probably give them your number. Is that okay?" "Sure," I replied. "Sorry I can't help." I spent the next few hours reflecting on my life with Cheryl. Memories of her came rushing back, especially moments when I had questioned her fidelity. The doubts had never been serious, just fleeting thoughts when she spent too much time talking to other men or went on trips with her friends. But now, in light of everything, I wondered if there had been more I had missed. I regretted being so trusting and naive. Maybe if I'd been more attentive, things might have been different. But the truth was clear. She had betrayed me, not the other way around. A stop for some coffee helped clear my head. I didn't cheat. She was the one who left it there. The phone buzzed again, but the reception was too spotty to have a proper conversation. I decided not to worry about it and kept driving. Following Vince's directions, I made my way toward the lodge. The GPS was essential, guiding me through winding roads near the Chazy River, where the water flowed fast and loud over the rocks. As I neared the lodge, I missed a turn and got an immediate alert from the GPS. A quarter-mile of gravel road later, I arrived at a stone lodge perched on a hill by the river. The sound of the rushing water filled the air. When I stepped out of the car, I saw Linda standing in the doorway, illuminated by the light inside. It seemed she had been waiting for me. I was flattered and happy to see her. She rushed over as I brought in my bags, throwing her arms around me in an enthusiastic hug. We both pulled back, slightly embarrassed, but I could tell she was happy to have me there. She had chili on the stove and cold beer in the fridge. It was the perfect end to a long day. Linda and I spent several hours talking, though I tried not to push things too fast. I liked her, but both of us were married, and I wasn't experienced with romance. The guest room was comfortable, but I kept wishing I were in the master bedroom. Tomorrow, I'd have to be more assertive. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of sausage and biscuits. Linda waited until I'd dragged myself out of bed, scruffy and tired, before starting the eggs. She was cheerful and looked much better in casual clothes, like the ones she wore from El Bean compared to the city outfits she used to wear. She proudly served quince jelly, homemade by her. It was delicious. After we finished the first pot of coffee, I excused myself to shower and shave. The day passed comfortably. We spent the morning walking around her property, hundreds of acres bordered by a river on one side and the main road on the other. I'd never seen so many rocks in my life. It looked like a glacier had passed through here ages ago. After lunch, Linda introduced me to a room filled with fishing gear. Her eyes sparkled when she saw my interest. I knew 2 weeks wouldn't be enough time to explore it all. I tried calling Janice a few times, but the signal was poor. There was electricity at the lodge, but no phone. Linda said it was her father's preference, and I wasn't about to argue with that. While Linda kept busy with chores, I explored the fishing equipment. I didn't have a New York fishing license, but Vince had left his vest with one attached. I doubted anyone would check me on this private stretch of river, but I wore it anyway. I chose an old bamboo fly rod with broken guides. It was at least 50 years old. I also found an old Mitchell spinning reel that just needed some maintenance. There was even a broken spinning rod with the perfect eyelets for my project. I was excited for tomorrow. Dinner that evening was homemade spaghetti. Delicious, though I missed the fresh Italian bread. I made up for it with a second beer. Despite it being summer, we decided to build a fire, which made the evening feel cozy and romantic. By the time the fire started to die down, I'd finished fixing the fly rod. Linda and I spent the rest of the evening relaxing by the fire, trying to use an antique popcorn maker, though we burned more kernels than we saved. It was fun. As the fire burned low, Linda looked at me and asked, "You're not going to make me sleep alone, are you?" I missed the morning fishing session, but it didn't matter. When we finally got up, it was too late for breakfast, so we had omelets for lunch. I was surprised at how well we got along, both in bed and at the table. Linda insisted I go fishing after lunch, claiming she needed rest. I spent 20 minutes collecting larvae for bait from the stream bed. Illegal, but effective. In under an hour, I had 4 beautiful trout. For dinner, we had fresh fish and home fries, along with some Matthias rose she'd brought just for the occasion. It was perfect. After 5 days of bliss, I figured I'd check in with Janice. We went into Plattsburgh for some burgers and fries, and I finally got a signal. Cheryl was now in FBI custody, but Janice didn't know any more details. Honestly, I didn't care. I called my lawyer, and everything was progressing smoothly with the divorce. The real estate agent had an offer on the house, but they couldn't get Cheryl's signature. I agreed to return the next day to sign the papers, though I had no idea how they'd get Cheryl's approval. The next morning, Linda told me I didn't need to drive back to Pennsylvania. We went to the Plattsburgh airport where a private jet was waiting for us. I had no idea how she'd arranged it. 2 hours later, we were back at the lodge. It must be nice to have a rich father. While Linda spent time with her dad, I took care of some errands. 3 hours later, we headed back to the lodge. Linda had packed a few more bottles of wine and some new clothes, though I wasn't sure why. It felt good to return to the lodge. It was starting to feel like home. 2 weeks later, Vince Carmichael showed up. He handed me my final divorce decree. Officially, I was a free man. He also handed me a death certificate for Alan Wallace, who had apparently drowned in Montego Bay. No one knew how or why, but it seemed clear the FBI had no further interest in Cheryl. She was back living with Janice. Vince had arranged for all of my belongings to be put into storage, though I didn't know if Cheryl had claimed anything. My old job would still be waiting if I ever wanted to go back, but for now, I was content to enjoy the peace and quiet of the West Branch of the Chazy River for the winter.